Yawahascano. These Swedes are tall people. My name is Joat Gusso, and I sit on the Onondaga Council of Chiefs, and I've been sitting there since 1965. So I have a little experience as when it comes to governance, and I must say that I've learned a lot in this time. I've learned a lot from the Chiefs Council itself, most actually. And I want to, take the time here to thank the Swedish Embassy and Ambassador Oren for greeting us and hosting this most important event, and giving us the opportunity to explain some relationships. And you will bear with me as we go through some kind of a history here, because we always get, a lot of wrinkling of foreheads when they say Six Nations in Sweden, Iroquois in Sweden, and people go like this. They try to understand the relationship. Well, it's quite simple. I've been traveling to Sweden for these past almost 14 years now, 13 years. And in that time, I found very, very open discussions and eager discussions about our philosophy, the philosophy of the Haudenosaunee, in particular, the responsibility to 7 generations coming, the long-term responsibility to the people who are our responsibility in the future. So I will begin my my written notes here, which are handwritten, and bear with me when I make some mistakes here. But I begin with the title of this talk. There is no alternative to water. I want you to think about that. There is no alternative to water. And that's going to be the foundation of the discussion. Chief Johnson has some belts, some treaty belts, and if he would bring me the George Washington Covenant belt, just for some information that I'm sure you don't know. And I also would introduce, this is Chief Johnson, who has been sitting on this council with me for a long time. I've learned a lot from him. And I also recognize my brother chiefs back there, Chief Jake Edwards and Chief Thomas, and the Tadadaho, the head chief of the Six Nation Confederacy, Chief Sidney Hill. He's our leader. And they're here because this is a business that we are involved in. Now here, this is a replica. This is what you call a wampum belt. And this belt was commissioned by President George Washington. And they made this belt for the Treaty of 1794, the Canandaigua Treaty of Peace and Friendship. This is a belt made by your first president. And I'm sure you didn't know that presidents were making wampum belts at that time. But that's how close and how interwoven the Six Nations was with the beginning of your confederacy. So when you have a union, it comes from our union. And I just want to remind all of you here that you don't know this. And as a professor of history at the University of Buffalo for 38 years, I had to teach your children that. They know, but before that they didn't. And I know the rest of the United States doesn't know. This is how close we were at that time, and how much we helped you in this whole ethical process of building a democratic government. So I go back, and we are here, and seated here, leaders from the Onondaga Nation, and they're holding titles that are over 1,000 years old. Our Confederacy is old, still here. And so our business is peace. The foundation principles of the Confederation is peace. And why we say business as usual is over. The Constitution of the Haudenosaunee is based upon three principles: peace, equity, and the power of the good minds, i.e., unity, to be united. The United States, to be united. That's your power, that's your strength, that's your authority under common cause. And it is powerful, and it is our instruction. And so Hans was very interested by these concepts and instructions of responsibility to future generations, 7 generations, and our relationship to the earth. If you remember, they said I was one of the leaders for the Turtle Clan. Chief Thomas is a principal leader of the Turtle Clan. I'm his partner. We sit in council for years. We've sat in council together on behalf of the welfare of not only the people but the earth, but everything that's on the earth. And so it was the genius of the great peacemaker at the time he brought us all together 1,000 years ago to tie us directly to the earth as a family, as a clan. So the turtles, and the bear, and the wolf, and the deer, and the snipe, and the eel, and the beaver, these are our family. And it's a reminder to us that they are family. And we are responsible. Took us beyond our ego of human beings and explained to us, this is your responsibility. That and the whole earth. And so the question was, could these instructions about responsibility to the future and the ethics of equity and respect for nature be a foundation for an ethical corporate voice in today's fierce competitive market? Hans is an expert in business and corporate structure, and I, in my responsibility to the Constitution of the Great Law of Peace, understand the laws of nature and the ethical behavior required of the human beings to maintain the law of regeneration that sustains our life on this earth. One reality is becoming painfully clear. Human population is outstripping the resources of the earth. Just this past month, October 2011, the human population reached 7 billion. 61 years ago, 1950, there were approximately 2.5 billion people in the world. It took hundreds of thousands of years to reach 2.5 billion. And in just 61 years, we've added 4 more billion people. Do the math on that one. That is a compound equation. We are challenging the carrying capacity of the earth. We have challenged the universal solar systems that govern the thin layer of life-giving atmosphere that sustain life on earth. Add to that the projected human population of 9 billion people within the next 30 years. Each life will require water to drink, food to eat, and land to live on. That's the reality we face as a species on this earth. And that's why we say, business as usual, it's over. The Plianagon greenhouse is a technological innovation designed to feed the megacity populations projected in the future. It will help, but it will not meet the issue of equity. The very amazing to me corporation of Ꭿ�罹, which is a engineering, environmental directed company and corporation, and their work has been astonishing to me. When you get a direction and you move in that direction, it's astounding what happens when you have a clarity of mission. So the Plianagon greenhouse will feed people, but it will not meet the issue of equity. This is the crux of the connection between our technological innovation of Plianagon and the ethical issue of equity. At this point, I remind you that this equity the great peacemaker brought to us over 1,000 years ago was inclusive. He included all the living beings, the plant life, the trees, the animals, the birds, the fish, the insects, all life. And he said to our leaders, I place the responsibility of all life in your hands. So when we move about and we talk about this around the earth, we are simply doing our duty in protecting all life, as we should all be aware of. We're connected. There's no such thing as environment over there. We're environment. We're flesh, bone, and blood, and we honor the same laws of all flesh, bone, and blood. We have intellect, but we don't seem to be able to use it well enough, at least at this point. The second innovation was to take 10% of the company and establish a nonprofit organization to return to the public at large money to do good. In other words, to establish within the structure of the corporation the value of sharing. If you Google Plianagon, you will find a process to buy a closing right, a share. One closing right to a name, so you can't pile it up. One closing right to a name. And why is it called a closing right? It's because you cannot be cashed in until 7 generations, or until the owners, the Onondaga Nation, cash out. The purpose is obvious. The share you buy today benefits 7 generations coming. We're trying to introduce a little different thinking in this whole issue of shares and company. Because you know as well as I do, you sit in a corporate meeting and you meet the shareholders, they demand that you show a profit. They demand that. And I remember, speaking at a global meeting in Switzerland, 93. And I was addressing them, and they said, well, the committee wants to meet with you. So we had lunch. And the committee, it seemed to me, was in charge of the whole world. It was an amazing committee. Huge corporate leaders, Krupp, Steele, all of the health, all of the insurance, as you know how powerful insurance is. They were all sitting there. So I said, good. I said, I want a question. I said, I wanted to meet you all to see who you were. And they were very nice, fine gentlemen, but everybody was wearing a shirt or sweater, no suits, casual, no notes, talking amongst friends. And I found out that they were discussing the future of next year for the whole world. So I asked them, and I said, I have a question. In this competition that you have in the international world, and as you ride your horse, you, the jockeys up, each CEO for each company, riding your horse in a competition to be number one. It's a tough race because if a horse goes down, nobody stops. Race doesn't stop. It goes on. And you're racing to this finish line. But it's not a electronic finish line, it's a stone wall. I'm saying, you corporate leaders know that resources are finite. How is it that you're whipping your horse into that wall? And they said, well, one gentleman spoke up. He said, okay, Chief. He says, I can answer that, I think, for everybody. He says, I represent this big company, and I won't say who. And he said, and my stockholders tell me I must show a profit. If I don't show a profit, I am fired. I said, good. Really? Yes. He said, so I'm just simply obeying orders. Wait a minute. Now, why is the CEO, as you know, a lot of experience and making big decisions? So I asked him, I said, do you have any grandchildren? And he says, I have a grandson that's 8 years old. And I said, really? I said, I have a grandson who is 8 years old. And that was Monty at the time. And we both kind of, we kind of puffed up, you know how grandfathers do. I have a grandson. I have a grandson. And I said to him, well then, I said, when do you cease to be a CEO and become a grandfather? Talking about responsibility to his grandson. He couldn't answer, and he didn't answer. Got very uncomfortable in the room, very uncomfortable. I kind of shuffled around. And then another voice piped up and said, well, Chief, tell us about these prophecies we hear about with Indians. Oh, prophecies. You come to the right one. I said, I got a prophecy for you. I said, and guaranteed. Ever hear of a guaranteed prophecy? I said, I got one for you. And I said, you will meet next year and nothing will have changed. Guaranteed. And was I right or was I right? Can't do that. Business as usual is over. If you continue in the direction you're going now, it's chaos for your children. And it's bad enough as it is right now on the issue of equity. As you know, the issue of equity is severe, and we have to address it. So planning on is one way of doing that. So when Hans came to the council at Onondaga, and he said, my plan is to share 10% of our company with the rest of the world. And our council thought about it for a minute, and they said, 10%? That's not much. What about 20? What about 30? And Hans said, take it easy. Take it easy. He says, 10% of a company is huge. He said, you can always raise it. But the response from the council was an ethic that we always had, which is to share. And we thought it was just simply a better way. So that was really very important. So we took a venture capitalist from California to vet the contract that Hans brought. And after vetting it over a long period of time, he came, and his first response when he first looked at it, he said, you guys know you're giving away 10% of your company? We said, yeah, we do. You can't do that. I said, why not? Why not? Nobody does that. I said, it doesn't mean we can't do it. And we are doing it. And so what he said at the end of vetting this whole thing, very substantial person, he said, when I first heard about this, He said, it was the concept of Pentagon itself. He said, it's huge, it's big. He said, I had a hard time getting my whole mind around this. It is, the concept that everything is so huge. But he said, after vetting the whole thing, and I say to the council, they remember very well, he stood there and said, don't change a word in that contract. It's in your favor. So Hans was ethical from the beginning. He was ethical. And he made that contract in our favor, and he said, but let me say this, he said. It's a big, huge endeavor that you have here, he said, but I think the 10% is bigger. And that's from a venture capitalist from California, because we're challenging the idea of one place having everything. We're saying simply, you're going to have to share. And why not? And why not indeed? So now we come back to finally the statement that I made, about water. Water. There is no alternative to water. Water is the first law of life. And the science is there. If you think about it, if every corporation and company in the world gave 10%, you wouldn't need charities. You wouldn't have hunger. It's a simple thing to do. Do we have the will? And so the opportunity is available. And if we take the temperature of the corporations and companies today in that regard, would we be sick? Would we be getting better? Or would we be very well? Take your temperature. See where you're at here in this equation. And today we face the consequence of our behavior. It's called climate change, global warming. And by James Lovelock, he says global heating. He says warming is too soft a term. The science is there, and it's been there for some time. James Hansen noted, climate scientist of NASA, put it this way, 10,000 years of good weather is over. Lester Brown, he's been issuing warning after warning, Plan B, Plan .4b, we're back with Plan C. Come on, how long are you going to wait? Every time you lose a position, you're not going to gain that back. That's a position gone. Our biggest problem is time. Time is a factor now, and we don't have a lot of it. And let me just say that very clear. We do not. So, the Pentagon greenhouse will help meet the issue of human survival, but it will not solve the moral issue of our responsibility to future generations. This is a collective responsibility to all of us who are here in this room. We, the Haudenosaunee, now, I'm going to take this moment, to recognize the courageous act and responsibility of President Obama to stop the Keystone Pipeline XL. Now, that was an amazing thing for him to do. He challenged the corporate powers of the world on that one. He listened to the thousands of people on the streets who share the inequity of that pipeline. And he took a stand. And he has the support of the Haudenosaunee now behind him. We'll stand with him. And all the Indian nations across the country will stand with him. Because he took a position, a strong one. And that's how it's going to change. It's going to take courage. Leading anybody or anything is easy when everybody's going in the same direction. It's when they choose to go the other way when the leadership is challenged. It's hard to stand in front of somebody and say, you are wrong. And I'm here to tell you. It's hard, and that's where leadership stands. That's when you see a leader or not. And I think that's where we are today. So With that, thank you to President Obama for that courageous act. And more to come with that fracking. More to come. Come back to full circle, the statement, there is no alternative to water. And that's a statement worth repeating. There is no alternative to water. We must remind ourselves, our families, and our leaders, and the leaders of the world, that water is the first law of life, and it is our responsibility to protect it. Donate. Now I am finished. Thank you.